radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And today's Thursday, May 25th, 2023. And tonight, our guest is Terry Tibando. And we're going to be talking about his 6-volume book series on UFOs, Contact, and the Search for ET. And tonight's show is brought to you by Accidental Truth. It is the new documentary directed by Ron James, streaming on all platforms. The link for it is below. Go and check out Accidental Truth today. It is an amazing film. My 8 seconds. That's all I have to say. Check out Accidental Truth, the new film by Ron James today. And I am ready to get straight to it. Now, Terry is someone who has majored in astronomy, math, physics, geography, and the sciences at the University of Victoria in British Columbia. He is the author of a massive encyclopedic series of textbooks that are comprehensive, definitive, and conclusive, utilizing the best available information on the subject of UFOs and ETI. We're going to be going through all of that tonight and much more, and maybe get a little CE5 conversation in as well. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Terry Tibando. He's right there. Terry, good evening, young man. How you doing?
Good evening, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yeah, it's great to finally have you here. And Terry, you get the first time guest disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way. I know you're all excited about that. It's just you and I, Terry, sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. All right. Accept. Do you accept?
I accept.
You got to click. You got to click on the little checkbox. So welcome to the show, Terry. It's about time that we have you on. And this, the 6-volume set, and I'm just going to start at some point tonight when we get there. Volume 1, we'll go by the titles because the subject is laid out right there. And I want to kind of break each one of those down if we can. But you've been at this for a long time. And one of the subjects that I like to talk about a lot, in fact, I was on with Christina Gomez earlier today on her show, talking about the universe and physics and all of that stuff. You have that background too. And when you look at where we are today with UFO/UAPs and your background in science, do the two, and I'm talking about science, and UFOs and UAPs, are the two starting to overlap finally? Do you think that the science supports what's going on?
Yeah, I think it does. The problem that I see here, and this isn't to marginalize anybody's belief in the terminology of UFO and UAP, because I really think they're the same animal. And when I say that, historically, the militaries during the Second World War knew what they were. So when they came out recently and said that we've only been studying it for 12 years and we're not certain whether they're extraterrestrial or they're from another country, I hate to say this, but it's a bold-faced lie. They know exactly what's going on and have known, because the British and the Americans talked about this. General Dwight D. Eisenhower and Sir Winston Churchill, later Prime Minister Churchill, discussed this because they didn't know whether to release the information to the public. And the feeling was at that time they thought that the world was already in a state of pandemonium and shock and awe and the chaos of war. And now you're going to introduce something that's not from this planet. And that was their assessment. Roosevelt had information given to him on a routine basis from the European theater of war and from the Pacific theater of war. And what was happening is that these devices that were called foo fighters, or foo from the French word meaning fire, were being seen by both the Allied and the Axis powers, and neither one knew who they belonged to. And some of these foo fighters behaved in very strange manner, where they would pace the aircraft that was flying along, and sometimes move right through the aircraft onto the opposite side. So they were exhibiting a technology that at that time we didn't know anything about it. Even on naval ships, they were getting sightings of craft flying over. And in 1951-52, there was a naval operation known by Operation Exercise or Main Brace. And what it was the Allied ships, about 200 ships, thousands of aircraft, 10,000 soldiers and sailors were on board these Navy ships from different countries, Canada, Britain, Argentina. Whoever was an ally during the Second War had a vested interest in this exercise, and it was held in the North Atlantic. And during that time period, they had craft flying out of the ocean, over their craft, and out into space, or vice versa. And loads of people, lots of soldiers and servicemen, Navy people were photographing this. And I have a photograph that shows an object up in the sky above the mass of one of the ships. It didn't identify which ship, but that was evidence that they were photographing. And the problem here was that the officers on board requested, or not requested, but ordered all men to stay below unless it was absolutely necessary for them to be on the deck to do whatever operations, deal with the aircraft taking off and coming in. If they had no reason to be up there, they were to stay in their quarters, because they knew that there were things flying around. So the term UFO and UAP is a Navy nomenclature that was developed particularly after the Second World War, and UAPs just recently, to describe something that was unidentified. And whether it was flying, whether it was an object, an aerial phenomena, that was the terminology. Now, personally, I prefer the term ETVs, extraterrestrial vehicles, because that's what was the conclusion at the end of the Second World War as to what they were. And recently, particularly from 1947 onwards, there has been a lot of investigation and development and crash retrievals of objects that have been downed and developed. And so there is another element to this called alien reproduction vehicles, which are man-made craft that look like and simulate what ETs are, or ET craft. And the problem here is now, how do you differentiate between the two? Because at one point, ET craft were definitely physical, and now they're more of a holographic or interdimensional device that move and slip through our reality, from one reality into this reality. And then when you see that in the sky with your eyes, it's bleeding through into this reality of ours. So that's my perception of UFOs and UAPs.
Well, the discussion today, you just alluded to this, but the discussion today out of Washington, D.C. is, well, okay, we need to investigate. We don't know anything. And that is an untruth. Now, I don't know if that is a spin on really where they're coming from, that they don't understand some of it, right? And they are able to say that without actually telling an outright lie, or they know an awful lot. They've made if you have a crash retrieval, right, in your possession, which I believe that they do, and if you have something like that in your possession, then saying that you need to do more investigation and that you don't know what's going on, then you're lying to us. We just need to get closer to what is it that they know so we can start to unravel this thing, right?
Exactly. The problem is, I think there are people within, let's just say, the U.S. government as the entity that we're discussing, that there are people within the government that know nothing about what's going on. They're completely dark on the subject.
Sure.
There are others that do know what's going on, but only to a very finite amount of information. Every once in a while, a president comes into power, whether he's Republican or Democrat, and he's given so much information up front that's intelligence. And depending on his background, if he has a military background, they're going to give him a little more information than somebody who does not have a military background. And so the problem here is, like, I'm going to tell you that yes, there are such things as flying saucers or UAPs or UFOs, whatever terminology you want to use. I think we're talking about the same animal, but they're not going to give him everything that he wants to know. And we've seen presidents who have tried to get in and find out what's going on, and usually there's a number of barriers put up in front of them, so they never get really beyond a sort of inquisitive information of, yeah, there's something to it, but we're investigating it. So that's the limited about information that they have. What I find is that when you look at the fact that they've been targeting these craft for decades, literally from the Second World War, and maybe even before then, that they are already starting to figure out what's going on, how they're put together to a degree, what is the modus operandi. It's even to the point of what are the beings and what are they like? Are they different from us completely, or are they similar? And so they're tinkering with the DNA as well of extraterrestrial life forms. So when they come out with this blanket statement saying, well, we really don't know what they are, we're investigating, they could be extraterrestrial, but they could also be from China or Russia or maybe some other power. That's also a possibility, but we also know that it's also being developed in the U.S. And there was a major breakthrough back in the early to mid 50s, where anti-gravitics and electromagnetism was understood, and that they were able to make craft fly with a self-contained unit. There was no additives like oil, fuel, atomic power, whatever. They had a solid state device that was working. Now you got to understand something. The Germans, Nazi Germany, developed this first. And this is the whole point behind Operation Paperclip. And the 1,500 scientists, Nazi scientists, that came to the United States in the Southwest. They were used to develop the atomic bomb, or actually after the atomic bomb, but they were looking at the V-2 rockets and some of the craft that they actually built, such as the Haunebu 2. That craft actually flew, and I have photographs of that. The thing about this is that when we go down this path of who did it first, we're going to hit a lot of barriers that we're going to have to jump over in order to get to the truth. And that's the whole point behind this whole phenomena, is that if they are indeed extraterrestrial, which I believe they are, and I've had an experience with that since my childhood, that then we got to have to start looking at our solar system and the universe at large, that there's life out there, and it's coming to visit us at this point. And so the thing is, when people are speculating and they're saying, well, they're from this particular star system, there's Zeta Reticuli, there's Draconians, there's insectoids, etc., 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 the reality is they may look like those things, but no ET, as far as I know, has ever come up and said, this is who I am, this is where I come from, this is how I got here. That hasn't happened. If it is, somebody's not telling everybody else about it. They're keeping it under wraps.
Now, it's funny that you say that because, and I'm not in any way correcting you here, good sir, but let me say this. Last night, I watched the documentary that was released in 2022. It's new, on Betty and Barney Hill with Kathleen Martin, and Ben Hansen does a great job in it. And it's a full length documentary. And I've interviewed Kathleen many times about Betty and Barney, but watching that documentary last night and listening to the original tapes of their hypnosis sessions, number one, but number two, watching them speak in person, right? It's been a while, and that we kind of lose sight of the importance of Betty and Barney Hill. But one thing that always fascinated, and I actually hit rewind about that case, was Betty and the star map, right? And Marjorie Fish, the school teacher from Ohio. And pointing out on the 3D map, and then Marjorie Fish put it together, and they came from Zeta Reticuli 1 or 2, and it was binary star system. And the story we know well, but it was something that for me is overlooked, and that caught my attention again last night, and I watched it over and over again. And it's an example of exactly what you're saying. That part of it, we don't get a lot of information, but Betty and Barney gave it to us, and the star map with Betty Hill. Do you think that the government knows that there is contact coming throughout the universe, certainly, but we have something that's pinpointed to Zeta Reticuli? Do you think the government knows this?
Well, I think, one of the things when I wrote my books, I discovered there was a lot of errors in the UFO database. I even had to change some of my own personal thinking about it, because I realized that I was accepting a lot of things that traditionally everybody else in the UFO community was accepting.
Sure.
And one of the things that I found was that star map. Now, having taken astronomy at university, you can put a lot of dots and pins in strings and represent them by luminosity, which is what Marjorie Fish did. And then she moved the map around, the three-dimensional map around, until she got what was very close to what she thought was a recognizable star system. I would say this, and I'm not trying to bang heads with anybody, but you can pretty much get any stars to look like a certain pattern if you move them around. And
100%.
Stanton Freeman also mentioned this. Now, the interesting thing is that I admire the fact that Marjorie Fish went to all that work to try and establish the fact that there may be a map that Betty Hill recalled, and she drew, and Marjorie Fish was able to locate it through her model. The problem is this, and I always say people have got to start asking the hard questions. The hard questions is, why do you need a star map to get from one place to another? Because she saw that in the spaceship that she was aboard. So obviously there was something there that she saw that had an importance or relevance to the ETs. But we all know that our own astronauts and cosmonauts that go into space don't use maps to get their spacecraft to go, say, to the moon or to Mars or out to Saturn and to Pluto. They use numbers to guide them and control burns to get them to where they want to go, and slingshot effects of going around a planet close enough that throws it off into a certain direction. So if ETs need maps, it's a possibility, but that's their way of perhaps comprehending, or their type of consciousness. We humans don't need that type of map in order to know where Zeta Reticuli is. We can go, when an astronomer wants to point his telescope and say he doesn't know where Zeta Reticuli is, but he's got the coordinates based on other research from other astronomers. He punches in the coordinates, right ascension, declination, and the telescope moves. It's already aligned with the North Star, and it moves with the movement of the Earth, so it can track that star. That's all done by numbers. You don't need a map. Now, the other thing that is interesting is, and I've read the story, I've got a couple of books on that. I saw the movie with James Earl Jones doing the role, and I thought it was a fascinating movie at the time. But I, like a lot of people, started to look at it and re-examine what was going on. And one of the interesting things was that one of the ETs wore a hat. Now, this is one of those weird things that comes out of left field, and we don't know why that ET wore a hat, because none of them, but that one particular ET, wore this hat. Also, they did an amniocentesis on Betty in order to determine pregnancy. Now, at the time, as far as I'm aware of, sticking a needle into the navel in order to tell whether or not she was pregnant and get that information was not heard of. So that may have been rather new, but in the black world of science, they're further ahead than we are in the mainstream science. And we're going to find that throughout this study of ufology. And what we're finding is that there's certain things that don't start to add up. They look close, but there's nothing conclusive. One of the interesting things is, I had my own experience 8 years before Barney and Betty Hill, that I saw little beings come through the bedroom wall of in the house that I was living in, and they looked like Casper the Ghost. That was my perception of them, little men. And what I saw were these very illuminated beings with large eyes, but their eyes were similar to human. They didn't have black lenses over them or anything like that. And they came through the wall 3 times because they wanted my attention. Now, you have to understand something. Prior to that event, we lived on an Air Force base in St. Jean, Quebec. My father was in the Air Force. We got moved around all over the place. We went to St. Jean, Quebec. And one of the interesting things, my twin brother and I were asked by my father to go down and watch a baseball game with him and the servicemen that were playing. And we had just arrived at this air base about a week or so earlier. And we got very bored watching, because we were the only 2 people watching a bunch of men play baseball. So we were looking around thinking, this is boring, we got to do something. And we spotted an aircraft nearby on the tarmac. So my brother and I said, let's go over and take a look. So we disappeared. My father never even missed us. We went over and we saw this aircraft that had swept wings, a very large tail, a nozzle on the tail end, and a tiny propeller at the front. And what it was a German Messerschmitt 163E Comet rocket plane.
Right.
And interestingly enough, the canopy was open. So we climbed up and board of this thing and played around with the controls and everything else. Now, what I figured was that between the British and the Canadians, they put this on a ship or a barge, because there's a river nearby, and unloaded it, and this is where it ended up. And my brother and I had the opportunity to play with this craft for about a half hour. Later on, within about 2-3 weeks or so, my mother and I are going out for a walk along the airbase on one of the roads, taking my youngest brother at the time for a walk in his baby carriage. I see this object comes moving in, and it stops and hovers above a building about 500 feet away during the daytime. And I said to my mother, "What's that?" And she looks at it. She says, "I don't know what it is, but I think it's an airplane." And the moment she said that, it took off. Now, the thing about this is that it was dark underneath. It was a typical flying saucer. It reminded me of a Mexican sombrero hat. It didn't have the curls, but it was like that. Had had a dome on the top, and it was brighter on the top but dark underneath. Now, from that day on, I always thought that aircraft were also flying saucers. That's a 5-year-old type of thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
And within a few days, I had the ET event where they came into the bedroom, and it freaked me out because I didn't understand what was going on. Were they ghosts? Were they little men? I don't know. I was calling for my mother. She came in. She said, "What's going on?" I said, "There's little men behind the door." She went over to take a look. She said, "There's nothing there. You're having a nightmare." So she calms me down, and she says, "Okay, now get some sleep." And out she goes. The moment she goes out, these little beings, 3 of them, come through the wall again. And now I'm just going nuts because it wasn't a dream. I'm actually seeing this. She comes back in. She says, "You're woken up the whole house. What's going on?" I said, "They're back." And again, she had to reassure me that there was nothing there. And she spent maybe 10 minutes calming me down. And she said, "Look, Christmas is coming up. Think of all the presents you're going to get." And she said, "I'm no more crying." And she left the room. Well, damn it. 3rd time, these beings, they show up. And this time they're walking around the bottom of the bed coming up towards the top. So not wishing to cry and freak out, I pulled the sheets over my head thinking, if I can't see them, they can't see me, they're not there. Typical 5-year-old logic.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
And but there was something in the back of my mind that said the covers came off me. I don't have any other memory beyond that. Was I abducted? I don't think so. I don't feel I've ever been abducted in my life. And I've been out and had contact with different types of ET. And if they're not taking me, I must be chopped liver, because I've been with other groups of people and they haven't taken them either. We're not missing time. We're not having invasive medical procedures. Our memories are intact. We're memorizing or remembering in real time. So now we're looking at another disconnect in this whole phenomena.
Right.
Why are people having negative experiences where they're frightened out of their lives about it and have to get some psychological help of one form or another? And then there are others like ourselves who are involved in global contact with these through CE5 protocols. And I can tell you that I've been doing this for 30 years, leading people out, and we've had contact. ETs will actually come up and touch us. We can't touch them because they're in an altered form or interdimensional form, transdimensional, whatever term you want to use. Sometimes we see flashes of them. Sometimes we get odors in the environment that are not associated with the environment. It's all this high strangeness that J. Allen Hynek talked about. And we're getting all of that. We're getting a compression of sound, a feeling of other presence, being touched on the shoulders or on the hands or the face. We're getting objects that are being interacted with, like the magnetometer. And magnetometers normally go beep, beep, beep. That's about it. But what I found was I've had this magnetometer. I've taken it down to Rio Rico to attend one of Dr. Stephen Greer's events. And this thing was going off like full steam ahead. And it was just beep, 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 incessantly for 3 hours, nonstop. I've had it here locally in Coquitlam where it would go beep, 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 and then stop. And when I would say something to somebody about something, it would go beep, beep, beep after I finished saying it. in a sequence of threes. It's never done that before. So what they're doing is they're interfacing with the magnetometer to let us know they're present. Normally, when ET, this is part of the CE5 protocols, when they're showing up and we're seeing them as objects in the sky, we're going to flash a laser at them. Usually it circles around them to see if they respond, whether they're power up, move to the right or left, up, down, whatever, and to see if that really is a UFO, an extraterrestrial spacecraft. When we get that connection and we start to get devices being interacted with, they're interfacing with our electronics, or they come up and start touching us, that craft has landed, and in all likelihood, it's landed on top of us. We're inside the craft. This is why people will sometimes see movement around us, whether in the form of shapes of people or entities or flashes of light. I've had a device that's a strobe light that I was using to outline a circled area for the ETs to land, thinking they're going to land physically. And what happened was, this was during the time when the BCTV people came out and did an interview with myself and my CSETI group, my CSETI Vancouver group. And what happened at the end of the evening, we went to pick up our lights and equipment, and one of my lights were missing. And I was looking all over for it. I thought, well, maybe it's such a sensitive light, it's halogen, that if it gets knocked, it probably stopped working. So I was looking around with another flashlight, couldn't find it. And I thought, oh, the heck with it. I'll come back early in the morning and I'll see it, because now it's daylight. So we're just about ready to go into the cars to leave. And one of the TV crew says, what's that light over in this, direction? And we turned, and about 200 feet from where I placed it was my light. And it was right beside a little gully, 1 foot further in, and it would have fell in the gully and I would not have seen it. Now, the thing that I have is that I tried to rationalize this. Could an animal picked it up thinking it was food and ran off with it, and when it realized it wasn't, it dropped it and ran off? So I picked it up, looking at it and feeling for saliva. I was smelling it to see if there's any animal scent on it. It was bone dry, and it was still functioning. So this was an indication, and I had sort of maybe a few months earlier wanted a demonstration of their ability. That was their ability. They could do that. Now you have to understand that interacting with a magnetometer and maybe moving an object is one thing, but they've actually interfered with avionics and navigation systems on board aircraft, such as the F-4s in Iran back in 1976.
Right.
And so what happens, they get in too close, they got to flip on their switches to engage with a missile lock-on, and all of a sudden they lose power, and the craft is now moving out of range and falling towards the Earth. And when it gets to a certain point, it gets all its avionics and navigation back on, and it's able to fly. Now that's a recorded event. There've been other ones like that in Iran, and there've been other cases in the States where certain people got too close, and maybe they were doing the same thing. They were locking on to shoot down these craft, and the moment they did, they lost their avionics and couldn't control and actually crashed. And Martel, the case with Martel is such an event that took place. And now the question is, what did the ETs or the UFO fire upon them? In all likelihood, and all the evidence points to the ETs doing their best to not engage with humans because they don't trust us, particularly when you're a military power, whether you're Chinese, Russian, Iranian, South African, Brazilian, US, Canada, whoever. If you're going to go up there and engage, and there were orders to shoot down these things in order to find out what they were, and I guess the US for the most part, has been very, very successful. Amongst other countries, there's been probably about 260 UFOs that have been brought down. That means if the bodies were still in the craft and the craft was reasonably intact, they knew what the bodies were. They knew
Yeah,
what
that makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, back in February, we're shooting down 3 UAPs with missiles over North America, which shows exactly what you're saying there. We shoot first, right? We shoot first. I wanted to, staying on this, when I had Tom DeLong on the show, this is probably before TTSA, I can't remember exactly, but he said one thing during the show that stuck with me over the years. He said that we need to be careful with who we're consciously trying to make contact with. You can see a light in the sky and you can consciously connect with that, but you don't know if that's friend or foe, right? You're just reaching out. And then, and I always thought that was a pretty interesting comment to make. 1, 2, he said that inside of the Pentagon that there is a definite religious component to UAP and what they may be. And I thought that was a pretty nice addendum to what he said about the conscious connection. But then we have the third part, which again, all 3 of these things you just mentioned, which is for everybody out there. I haven't had a bad experience. I haven't had a negative experience. I've had a lot of experience in contact, but I haven't had a negative one. But for everybody out there like me, there's somebody out there that will say, dude, don't mess. I had a horrible experience. Yeah. I had a fighting experience. I had a violent experience. It was not good. And so don't tell me that UFOs and ET is here to make nice with us. That's BS. And so it's really strange how we have these different points of view. But then again, it can't be just one species. It can't be one ETI that is reaching out to us. Yeah. It's got to be tens of thousands of different planets that are aware of us.
Yeah. I mean, in my books, and right at the beginning of the first few pages, I have a quote, which is, "Know thou that every fixed star," meaning a stable star, "hath its planets, and every planet hath its creatures, whose number no man can compute." Now that's a writing by Baha'u'llah from the Baha'i faith. There's a lot in the Baha'i faith that talks about extraterrestrial life, probably more so than most religions. But the interesting thing about that is when they talk about a stable star, and you have to understand something. NASA and a lot of astronomy have based the prospects of life based on the zone of habitability, which is roughly where the Earth and maybe Mars is, and maybe Venus is. Mercury is probably too close, so therefore it may not have life, but the other 3 planets probably do. Now we're looking at some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn that have atmospheres and geysers on them, all kinds of things going on, and an ocean below layers of ice. So what this is saying, and there's also with the recent spacecraft that went out to Pluto and photographed Pluto and Charon, its moon, and other things in the Kuiper belt, is that there is probably life even on Pluto. They found some weird things that look very huge that leave trails on the ice. They think it's just rock coming up through the surface of the ice, but these things are odd looking to me, and I can't prove this one way or the other. It looks like giant slugs is what it looks like, or snails. Now, the point I'm getting at is NASA has now had to revise its zone of habitability further out than it first did. Well, in the Baha'i writings, it's saying if the star is stable, and by stable, it means it's already gone through its proto state where it's already developed, its planets have already reached a point of coalescence, and they're spherical bodies, and they're orbiting the sun or the star. In which case, if that's a stable star system, there's going to be life on those planets. We don't know what that life will be, but there will be life. It could be plant life, it could be microbial, it could be sea life. You can let your imagination run wild, because the point here is that every life form in a stable star system will develop based on the conditions of its planet and its environment. So that there may be things that may appear humanoid, but may not. It could be something we can't even recognize as a life form. We may not even, when we do encounter life forms where we actually go out into the stars and on into other planets, that we could be confronted by a life form that we don't even recognize as intelligent, and they may feel the same way as us. Why is that? Because consciousness, which is also something that we have to factor in, is different. We can look at a cat and a dog and know it is conscious, and it likes us, and it knows that it will get food, and it will get some form of love and pets and all the rest of it. But it has no comprehension of what we're thinking, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and all the rest of it. No more than if I build a chair or table, that table is a creation of my being, but it doesn't comprehend me. Mm-hmm. So the thing that I'm saying here is that we're going to have to explore the whole concept of consciousness, not only amongst humans, but on other life forms, even starting with our own life forms on this planet. When we go to a star system that is, say, in a decay where it's going to go nova, it's going to explode, that's then an unstable star system. The planets that may still be there will suddenly be impacted by the nova, because the star is going to expand out and probably consume whatever planets are within a certain boundary. Those planets are done. So there is a life and death aspect to the universe in that sense. And it's going to happen to the Earth at some point, maybe billions of years down the road. So we got nothing to worry about unless we are living, you and I, for 1 billion years or more. So that's the point that I'm getting across. There's life in the universe, and why, we're looking for it. We're sending out radio signals hoping it's going to respond. And I've read cases where they said, yeah, we just got a signal, and it's about 900,000 light years away, or whatever. A radio signal that far away means that civilization probably has stopped using radio signals. You're not going to communicate with ETs on another star system using luminal speed technology, which is what we have currently.
Correct.
We have to go beyond luminal speed. We have to go superluminal or something else. And that something else is probably interdimensionality, which is meaning that the space between an atom is a lot of space, though we see the atom is very, very minute. The fact is that a lot of the environment in the physical world is made up of atoms and lots of space. And so it's the same thing. We've got a fractal, the microverse and the macroverse. And when we understand that there's this fractal repeat of a pattern, then it starts to become a little easier to understand that the macroverse, the universe that we all talk about, is very similar to the microverse. And that means too, and this, I'm putting my neck on the chopping block when I say this, it means at some point we're going to discover life on atoms.
Yeah, could be. I just watched Ant-Man and the Wasp and Quantumania. And for everybody, now look, I know it's Marvel does more, about spreading the word of science than probably any university. But that being said, Quantumania is about the world at the quantum level where they go down and it's a crazy movie to see. Now I want to circle back though.
Okay.
Hold on, Terry. Hold on. I'm not taking notes. Now I need to get I've got my notepad out because I want to go back to a couple of your points. Number one, yes, we've got approximately 5 billion years left on our sun. But in about 1 billion years, the instability is going to start. So we've got about 1 billion years to figure out how we're going to blow this popsicle stand. All right. We can't be here. That's it. But number two, 1 billion years from now, 500,000 years from now, a billion or 500 million years from now, would we even recognize ourselves as humans? Right? What would we, and what we're looking at today and talking about ET, well, you know what? They probably look just like us, 500 million years ago. Would we even recognize ourselves? And if I were a betting man, I'd say no, we wouldn't. We could be translucent. We don't know. We could be energy beings. Would we look like you and I covered in hair, these primitive apes that we are? No, I don't think that we would evolve into something else. And why are we questioning what we're seeing today like it's something strange? No, we're going to evolve into something completely different. And that's just the way that it is.
Exactly. And here's the thing, we're already seeing forms of evolution taking place very subtly, but they're taking place amongst humans. The fact that men lose their hair and now women are losing their hair, right? Men much more so. The fact that there are people who don't have wisdom teeth. I don't have wisdom teeth. That means technically I'm further along in the evolution. But, it's not something I wave a flag over and say, whoopee, I'm evolved. But the thing is, yes, you're absolutely right that we're going to evolve, and in 500 million years or more or less even, what would we look like? However, I will put this out, and this is call it a proposition, a hypothesis, and that in the universe there is a template that is very good, and that template is a star shape, which is what humans are, the Vitruvius man or Vitruvian man. And the types of ETs that have been seen so far fit into that category. They have a head, they have a body, they have arms, we don't know how many fingers, and they got some feet and some digits on it, right? Now, there are beings that are showing up that are really bizarre, and we've got case reports of that. The first volume explores the global UFO and ET contacts and sightings that are going on in many, many different countries. And some of these beings that are showing up have more than 2 sets of arms. Some are hairy, some are dwarf-like, some have big heads. A lot of them are wearing spacesuits of some kind. That's a clue right there that they're not from this planet. If they're breathing our atmosphere, we have to question, how is that possible? Because it may mean that they have a similar atmosphere to us, or maybe that's not a real ET. Maybe that's a biological life form. It's a programmed life form that humanity is creating. Now, the thing about this is that there are beings that are so weird that they look like part machine and part organic being. They have a pedestal for what appears to be feet, and a body and a head with an antenna and flippers off on the side. That's a recounting of one kind. The Pascagoula event with Calvin Parker and
the Michelin Man.
I'm the Michelin Man.
I never forgot the Calvin, who, man, I miss that guy already, man. He was a very fun guy to be around and stuff. But anyway, his recounting of the beings didn't fit the description of other encounters before. It was like a very singular type of description.
Yeah.
And the Michelin Man and how it was robotic. But why not? I think this is my take. Let me hear yours. That probably more times than not, ET that visits this planet is here once. They're doing a drive-by. There's another trillion planets out there to go and check out, right?
Yeah.
And so probably more times than not, it's just a single visit. There's just too much more work to go and do. You got to go and do your job in catalog, right? Catalog, and go visit. And so we would be seeing everything as different. Why are we so fixated, not us, but in general, that there must be only one kind of ET, only one civilization visiting us? No, my guess is it may be millions, Terry.
I know where you're going with that, and this is the thing that drives me up the wall. We're constantly bombarded with the little gray, the Zeta Reticuli, as it's called. And I don't like that term, and I don't like the term little gray. I don't like the term reptilian or insectoid, because we're labeling. It's like black, yellow, red, white. We've got to stop doing that kind of thinking, because that's racist right off the bat. We can't label something we don't understand. We're putting it into our own human terms to describe something we don't understand. Right. So what we're seeing in movies, in documentaries, on books is the little gray face. And usually it looks malevolent. The ones that I saw did not look malevolent. They looked like Casper the Ghost, and there was no harshness about them. If anything, it was more sort of a neutral look about them. And the thing is, did they have 3 fingers, 4 fingers? I have no idea. All I concentrated on was their faces, their body. That was it. Mm-hmm. Now, as I said, that was 8 years before Barney and Betty Hill had their experience. I've had other experience like this too, where I've done remote viewing. Back in '96, because I was an astronomy student prior to that I remote viewed one of the moons of Saturn. And I was with Dr. Greer and Sherry Adamak and about 30 other people who were doing remote viewing sessions during the day and in the evening. And I had a remote view where he asked, we want you to see if you could see any ET bases, whether on the Earth, in the ground, on the moon, on Mars, or any other planets like Saturn. My mind went to this moon of Saturn. And what I saw was what I thought was a sort of a geometric polyhedral form. And around the middle where the equator would be was a wide band of raised terrain, 12 miles high and about 12 to 20 miles in width, right around the equator. The other thing I noticed was there seemed to be geometric forms on the surface, and also what appeared to be a tall tower on one portion of the moon. Later, I did some research, and one of the things I looked at was Iapetus. I should have known some of the moons of Saturn, having taken astronomy, but I had to plead ignorance. I didn't. I looked at Iapetus, and darn if it didn't have this large equatorial ridge that ran around the equator, that it had a sort of a geometric polyhedral type form, and it had a tower in the southern hemisphere that in my remote view, it could extend out or contract. And I thought of this as perhaps a communication tower. Well, the Cassini space probe flies by Saturn and around some of the moons and all the rest of it, and it photographs this. And it photographs it in 2000, what was it, 94, 8 years, so about 2004, it photographed that. I had seen that 8 years prior.
Interesting.
That was confirmation of my remote view.
Yeah, that's well here's the other take. You and I are Earthlings. You and I are from the same planet. But let me tell you something. If the two of us got off of a craft on another planet and they took a look at you and I, they would think that we were from two different planets. And you would get shot first because you would look like Ming the Merciless. And so I would look like the benevolent peacemaker. You not so much, but yet we're both Earthlings, right? And we look completely different. And we are so. It's funny when I hear that argument. Why are we seeing these different types of craft? Why are we seeing these different kinds of? Why are we seeing? Well, what is it that you expect? Yeah. Look at the diversity of our own planet, right?
Exactly. And you know, I mean, the interesting thing is that, and first of all, I have to agree with you about your statement that they're only just passing by. You probably have been listening to my wife at some point, because she says they took one look and said, no, there's no intelligence here, and left. You know, and that you've got a bunch of people who she says are yahoos going out into the middle of the field and saying, come on, aliens, we're here, you know. And this is part of the CSETI protocols, is to engage ETs, whether they're friendly or not, or whether they're neutral or not. The thing is, are there malevolent ETs? Yeah, look at us. We're malevolent. You come here from another planet, you take your life in your own hands when you come here.
You can't even walk down the street.
Yeah, we're going to shoot you, throw a brick at you, stones, shoot missiles at you. That's what we do. Particle beam weapons, you name it.
Right.
We cannot be trusted because, you know, and this is, I'm going to go into an area here that is maybe a bit upsetting to some people, but I had a friend who passed away. And he always asked me, is there a spiritual component to this whole phenomena? And I said, yes, there is. Now, do we have complete understanding of it? No, but we have some pretty good ideas about it. And one of the things is that if you're an intelligent life form, if you're traveling to another planet, you're not going to go there and say, I wonder what resources they have, because we need some resources, gold, or maybe we need plant life or human life or DNA or whatever it is, right? The thing is that, as you may have mentioned, is they're flying by, they're writing down, yes, there's life forms and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the thing is, when we set off nuclear explosions and we dropped 2 bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan during the end of the war, we sent up a major red flag. And that brought a lot of attention that we didn't have before. We had ETs coming and going all the time, but they, you know, they're just saying, well, humans are evolving, they're developing this, that, and everything. But one of the things they must have realized is we're very warlike. We're always fighting over some land or some ideology, and we're killing off millions of people in the process. We're fighting amongst ourselves. Now, all of a sudden, we have technology that allows us to leave the planet. We've got nuclear weapons that we can take with us, or even lasers or particle beam weapons. Now we're arming our spacecraft if we want to, and we're going to start heading out amongst the stars, because according to some people, we've got reversed engineered technology from aliens, and we could probably go to Mars in a half hour like that, or even faster, which means there could be a settlement on Mars. Now, if that means that we can get to Mars and we're traveling, say, at the speed of light, then it is also conceivable that maybe that technology has allowed us to develop beyond the speed of light. And I've heard from Mark McCandlish, who made the blueprint of one of the ARVs, the first liner. I have it. I spoke to him. I got his blueprint. The point is that craft, he said, could do faster than the speed of light, multiples, in fact, which means it could leave the solar system very easily and travel to the nearest star system, which is 4.3 light years away, Proxima Centauri or Proxima. And there are others that are within 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 light years away, easily attainable now because you're doing multiples of the speed of light. Well, if you're armed to the teeth with weapons to defend yourself, you're sending out another red flag to the rest of the universe. You can't trust this species because they're warlike. They're like a disease. And so there's part of this research that says that we're being contained on this planet. We're not going to get too far. And if we do, it's by hook and by crook that we can escape the solar system. If we're going to Mars, are we looking for life? Yeah, we're looking for life. I found it. I found that life using NASA's own photographs. I found it. I've seen the technology. I've seen the plant life. I've seen the sea life. I've seen the animal life, and I found intelligent life. And not only did I find it, somebody else found it as well. The same humanoid tall being that's there, skeletal form. There are UFOs flying around on the surface of Mars, not only watching what's orbiting, and there are a number of nations already with craft up there orbiting around Mars, but there's also the rovers, which are mostly American, and there's little white surveillance drones following them along. And if you look in the photographs, you'll spot them because they're not on the ground, they're actually hovering above the ground. So what this says is Mars is not a cold, dead, barren planet. It's very much alive. In fact, it is in a state of regenesis because there are animal forms. I found two of them. One was looks like an Australian marsupial known as a bilby. Another one is the white marsupial mole. Now, this begs the question, are these photographs that we're seeing on Mars with the tracks and the animals in the background, is that really Mars or is that somewhere else on this planet? Australia, Baffin Island,
Utah. It could be Utah, man. It could
exactly, because you've got all those types of terrain. And
yeah.
So now you're saying, how is it possible that two planets can have almost the same animals? And I compare apples and oranges, and damn if they don't look the same. Now, I'm taking a chance by saying I've discovered a new species. I've even labeled it with scientific names, and I've said blah, 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 Animalia Tibando. In other words, the white rabbit that everybody used to call, I've actually found out that's the Martian bilby. And the white mole is also has a terrestrial cousin. And I've named that same thing, Tibando. Because that's what you do when you discover it. Now, if somebody else can say to me, oh, we've already discovered that and we've already named it, fine.
Yeah,
but I put a date on it.
Terry, stay right there. Got to get a break in. Our guest tonight, Terry Tibando. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023 as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long, featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. Also introducing our Disclosure Fest VR Starship area with dozens of rides. You've got to check it out. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. This is Jimmy Church, and I want to introduce you to LifeWaves X39 Stem Cell Activation Patch, which has totally transformed my health, my sleep, brain, and my eyes. I no longer need reading glasses. X39 is a true breakthrough in regenerative science. Using light, X39's patented age reversal technology is clinically proven to signal the activation of younger stem cells, accelerating the body's natural healing process. X39 promotes restoration and rejuvenation, bringing the life-changing benefits that I've experienced. By naturally elevating a master signaling peptide in the body, X39 boosts vitality, health and wellness, and resets 4,000 genes to a younger, healthier state. It's one patch, once a day, and you can turn back time with X39. Just go to healingworksnow.com. That's works with an X. healingworksnow.com.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests, shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest is Terry Tibando. And Terry has got a 6-volume set out. I want to go through these, Terry. Great conversation so far, by the way. But the books themselves, you describe them as encyclopedia, as reference books, as textbooks. And volume 1 is the global evidence of the UFO and ETI presence. And before I get your comments on that, one of the things I live in we all do, this is 2023. I see stuff all the time, and I've seen what I've seen, but I like to go back before there were flying machines and look at the ET presence of throughout history, before 1900, 1945, and before. It's always interesting to me. What do you think the presence is? Do you think it's best represented in what we're seeing today, or historic?
Historically, I'm a big fan of history, and part of my interest is history, medieval history, even some archaeological history. I have an interest, obviously, in UFO and ET phenomena. I have an interest in comparative religions. I have an interest in alternative energy forms. In the back, right here, right there, are my books. They're bigger than any of the other books that are on the bookshelf there. And volume 1 is 840 pages. Now, you have to understand something. When I wrote this, the set of books, I wrote it as one book, 3,636 pages. And I had to obviously divide it up into volumes because nobody's going to print a book that's this wide and maybe 50 pounds or thereabouts. The first volume is 6.5 pounds. It's massive. It's full of colored pictures. All of the books that I've written have colored pictures, which makes it expensive, like a university book. In fact, I've approached universities at it, and they said, well, at least up in Canada, we only teach 1 week of that in astronomy. And I said, we have nobody here that could teach it. And I said, well, I could teach it. The thing about this is that when I wrote it, I realized there was a lot of errors in the database, which I mentioned earlier. Now, the thing about this is, as I went through, I had to recorrect some of that to the best of my ability. And what I did was I had to look for 3 or 4 references that were good references that confirmed the same thing. If they did that, I utilized it. And so all quotes that I use in there has a reference link. There's either a book, a magazine, a newspaper, a web link, a videography link. In other words, for instance, it's all color coded. The blue references would be for web links, and the green would be for bibliography, and then the red would be for books, etc., etc. And so there are literally pages in the back of the book with all these references that I use. So there's a massive reference section. There's a massive index section. There's something like 122, 124 chapters in the whole set of books. Each of them is full of colored photographs. Each of them is conclusive and complete in its own volume, except for volumes 4 and 5, which basically follow each other, because it's a virtual tour through our solar system to look for extraterrestrial life. And I stop along each of the planets and look at the atmospheres and the stories or the scientific knowledge that is attributed to it. And Mars is the one that really stands out because there's all kinds of things on it. So when NASA says that, this is a cold, dead, barren planet, Russian astronauts were actually trying to breathe some of the Martian atmosphere to condition their cosmonauts in the eventual time when they would land on Mars and they were going to try and breathe Martian atmosphere. There is methane. Methane is a signature of mostly animal or plant life. Even if it's minute, it's an indication. It can come from rocks, which means that it can come up as a gas and leak out into space. But Mars does have an atmosphere. And all the evidence I found, and I sent you photographs of this, is that it indicates that there's all kinds of life forms on there. This also begs the question that if we're seeing similarities between some of the animal life forms on Mars and on Earth, is there a possibility that Martians came to Earth and seeded Earth with various life forms? Or did some ancient past of humanity went to Mars and brought stuff? Or was something else going on entirely? You don't normally get a lot of similarities on different planets because they're different. They're not twins. They're not exactly the same, even though Mars may have had oceans and seas at one time. And a lot of the rovers that are running around are going around into areas where there is believed to be water. And NASA, I think, has finally come out and admitted there is ice water, there is molecules, or deep down in the ground there's water. All the pictures that I've got show water on the surface, puddles as well as lakes. The thing about this is that when we look at history and what was occurring in our ancient time, yes, I believe we were being visited. But if we're looking at ancient aliens and the programs that we see from that, or the stories on the Discovery Channel or the History Channel, what we're finding is it's more like docu-entertainment. In other words, we're going to get some truth, but we're going to get a lot of subjective conjecture, a lot of interpretation. And what happens is that they will look at, say, some aspects of ancient religions and say, those were extraterrestrials. You can tell by the wings and the hoop around the individual. Well, if you were talking to a Zoroastrian believer, that image is of Zoroaster, the prophet for them. And you're basically giving them a slap across the side of the head and said, no, he's an extraterrestrial, when they know he's a prophet of God, much like Moses was a prophet of God, like Christ was the prophet of God, like Buddha, the Bab, Baha'u'llah. All these were manifestations of God. And so that's the spiritual connection to all of these things in the past. But ETs also have an awareness of a supreme force, a supreme deity, oneness, whatever you want to call it. They recognize that. They may not call it God, but they recognize that it's a creative force in the universe. And it is believed that in some ETs that we are engaging with, that they're using such benevolence as opposed to malevolence. And this is, again, the whole thing about alien abductions and good ETs, bad ETs has created a real divide in the UFO community. It's polarized us. And I've had people that I've talked to who literally got almost violent with me because they said that I had a real abduction, and how dare you tell me that these ETs were peaceful. And I said, I never told you that your experience was negative or that it was not real, because I wasn't there. Your experience is your experience, just as my experience is my experience. I've had 70 years of contact, 70 years of sightings. I've seen the military chase them around in the skies down in the States. So I know what they're up to. The fact of the matter is all of my contacts have always been positive, never negative. So if we're getting some negativity showing up, why would you have one species come to this planet and be absolutely terrible to us, and another species come and be absolutely wonderful, and another species just neutral? If we have a United Nations on this planet where we have nations coming together to work out their problems and all the rest of it, do you not think that maybe there's some form of global or interplanetary unity amongst them, that there are different species gathering together to work out their differences? Because if they're traveling around through the stars, you're going to be running into them every so often, and you've got to be able to deal with them on a level that is non-hostile and aggressive. So if we're getting that happening here, why are they fighting over the Earth? People said, well, they're fighting for the resources. They're fighting for our DNA. They want to control us. Well, if they wanted to control us, they've had tens of thousands of years to get it right the first time.
Well,
why wait now when we're a technological society? That's nonsense.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And you have an aura of being a nice person, right? You can see that aura about you, Terry. Let me ask you this: have you ever been fishing? Fishing, yeah. Have you ever been fishing?
Once or twice in my lifetime.
Okay, so you're fishing, right? And you hook a fish and pull it out of the water. you're a nice person, but down below there is a fish that goes, holy crap, there is an evil presence up there. I don't know what's going on above the edge of our universe, right? The surface of the water, but there's something up there that is just grabbing us and abducting us and eating us, right? But yet it's you. And you're not a bad person. And we have to accept that ET is what it is. Doesn't necessarily mean it's malevolent or benevolent, and I'm not in any way saying that abductions are a good thing. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. But we have to really look at ourselves when we think about what is going on out there in the universe. We're very blind to that we need to think that everything is a bit different. And if we back it up just a little bit, ET arriving here before radar and before electronics, right? ET could come and go as they wished. We didn't know that they were coming. We had no idea, no telescope, nothing. And so there was a freedom of entering and leaving this planet, and the civilizations had no clue of an extraterrestrial presence out there in the universe. We didn't have that worldview yet. We didn't have that knowledge base yet. We didn't understand. But now we do. So ET is aware of that. They know that we know that they're coming towards us. We know when they enter the atmosphere. We have technology and sensor systems that tell us what they are doing. So they have to avoid that now. And maybe it is an interdimensional thing. And that's part of the differences of what we're seeing today versus in the past. And that's just the way we are as a species on this planet. Why would ET be any different? We need to change our mindset, the way that we look at it.
Exactly. And, the thing is that it's no different than if we went back in time with our cell phones and cameras and whatever else electronic, it would appear as magic.
It'd be voodoo.
Voodoo. And I think it was Arthur C. Clarke that said any true extraterrestrial civilization will appear like magic. And that's exactly what we're experiencing. You got to understand something here, and not you personally, but your listenership. And that is, we just went through a pandemic for the last couple of years, and it is a disease that we were spreading amongst ourselves, and people were dying, and we were being locked down and all the rest of it. Now imagine a physical extraterrestrial, regardless of where he comes from, and he's having physical contact with people. That means if he's abducting us and doing whatever experiments or probing or taking DNA samples, what are the chances that we're going to be picking up something extraterrestrial from? What are the chances that he's going to pick up something terrestrial? In other words, when people, and I'm putting myself out in a lurch here, but when people tell me I had a physical contact with an ET, I said, well, how did you deal with the cross contamination? What? I said, the ET. I mean, he's going to have diseases, and they just take care of things. Oh, so you made a presumption based on something that you really don't understand. Mm-hmm. I say to people, look, if you're having a physical contact, there's a good chance you're going to pick up something. Case in point, the case in Virginia, Brazil, where a craft came down and the beings got out and ran around. In some of the pictures I sent you, there's an actual photograph of that being with a net over it. The thing about it, that one person touched that being. Within a half hour, he died.
Well, we probably gave ET COVID.
Who knows?
It does kind of go both ways. There was a statement. This is about 5 years ago. And it was pretty incredible. And then it just disappeared. But there was a press release that outside of the International Space Station, bacteria was growing. Now, wait a minute. Now let's just unpack that statement.
Mhm.
That bacteria survives in the vacuum of space and has collected and is growing on the outside of the International Space Station. That is a pretty incredible statement. And then it went nowhere.
Yep.
Now, obviously, they collected that bacteria. Did they bring it to Earth? Did they leave it up on the International Space Station? Whatever came of that. But the press release was real, and the statement was released by NASA. And I thought, how incredible is this? And then it went nowhere. That's again a lot like meteorites bringing amino acids and the basic sugars of RNA here, and we found it on asteroids, right? Japan has now done it twice.
Yeah.
We're going to get our second load of and this is coming from Bennu, and that's going to be in September, right? Collection of stuff from an asteroid, and we are going to be looking for just that, which would suggest to me that DNA is universal. And
Yes.
it goes back to your point that you made earlier, Terry. I don't want this to get away. I'm looking at my notes. When you said, 2 arms, 2 legs, head, right? This basic humanoid figure. If DNA is indeed universal, why would we expect something different? Now, sure, it wouldn't necessarily have to look like us, but 2 feet, 2 arms, right? Stereo vision head is a pretty good biological design. It works, right?
It works.
Why would it be any different throughout the universe if asteroids are dropping off RNA with the instructions for DNA on what to do? It just makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I've taken it further, and this would not be shared with the rest of the scientific community. This is Terry Tibando and hypothesizing, but we have a lot of gaseous clouds out in the universe, and gaseous clouds usually are probably the birthplace of a lot of stars and planets. And we find that there are creatures, even on this planet, that live in gas. So what is the chances that it could also live in a gaseous cloud out in space? Very, very probable. It's probably one of the reasons why, as you say, DNA, whether it be human or alien, has been able to evolve and take shape to become whatever. When we talk about aliens, and I was trying to mention this earlier and lost my thought, but there are beings that have appeared on the earth that look like body organs. They look like brains with an eye, or they look like some kind of blob with appendages that are like pseudo arms. There are creatures that are like stone or metal, which would seem to indicate to me that it's a silicon life form of some kind. Everything that you can imagine has probably shown up at some point or another. There are creatures that are probably octopoid with tentacles and stuff like that. Beings that are probably giant eyeballs on feet. I'm giving you a bit of a speculation here, and I don't usually do that. But what I'm saying here is that you can imagine, or there could be almost anything you cannot imagine that has existed. The star-shaped humanoid form is a very good form, as you pointed out. And we're getting those types of creatures that are, or intelligences that are showing up on this planet. The thing is that we have to start preparing ourselves for the unexpected, the unusual, the forms of consciousness that are going to be encountered, because we're going to try and make communication at some point. I mean, all my books cover all of this. There wasn't I basically, when I wrote them, left no stone unturned. I had to find answers to certain questions that needed to be asked. And I've gone down different paths. And what happens is it turns out a lot of the books that I've written are more about the human condition than there are about aliens, even though there's a good portion about aliens and craft.
Right.
So the thing is that, for instance, when we talk about their craft and the reverse engineering, once we understood how one or two of the craft worked, we put that engine into all the different configurations that are out there, whether they be wing shaped, delta shaped, whether they be spheres, diamonds, whether they look like barbells, whatever you can imagine, that device is being incorporated into it. So now it flies like a regular extraterrestrial craft. The only difference is it can't phase shift and move out of phase from one reality to another. But they're working on it. There are laboratories throughout the world basically working on this problem of trying to find how to use the interdimensional or transdimensional technology. For instance, and I use Dr. Greer's some of his stories and examples where he's actually been in one of these underground bases in southwestern United States, where he saw devices that will grow back a severed limb back to its normal, healthy condition. And he said there's technology there that are literally 50, 100 years ahead of what mainstream science has. Now imagine that they're using this in every form conceivable. Also understand why there are trillions of dollars being poured into the military and into black projects that are really off the books that you can never find out about. Dr. Greer is going to be giving another event at a disclosure event at Washington, D.C. on the 12th of June that people can either link in live and watch it, or they can go there and participate. It's a historical event. He's going to be talking more about the UFOs and whatnot, but he's also going to be talking about suppressed technologies like alternative energy forms, zero-point energy, etc. And so I'm not going to get into that because that's his whole thing. But you can go to his website, seriousdisclosure.com, and you can see all of that. The interesting thing is that we're at a critical time in our evolution on this planet where we can evolve into what I like to call an advanced divine civilization that is both material and spiritual, that the two work together. One of the things you have to understand, and your listenership is, science and religion are the same knowledge. One science is through invention and discovery. Religion is through inspiration and revelation. And science makes discoveries all the time. And religion gets its revelations approximately every 1,000 years when a prophet shows up. And when that prophet shows up, society is impacted in a positive way to move forward. And along the way, all kinds of other things start to happen. You need to see that knowledge and religion come from one source, one divine source, whatever that is. God, the cosmic muffin, whatever you want to term it as, that's where it comes from. So we're starting to see science and religion marry, but in fact, they've always been one. We just separated them out. So that we've had back in the 1600s a lot of inquisitions by the Roman Catholic Church against scientists and astronomers who said that the Earth revolves around the sun, not the sun around the Earth. And now they're pretty much on board with the fact that Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler were right about how the Earth operates. When as a member of the Baha'i faith, when we look at knowledge, we'll always give science the last word because they're basing it on facts and numbers and that sort of thing. When we look at religion will give accurate information, but it's always prosaic in the way that it's given. It's very poetical in some ways. But the thing is, when you start to examine it, if you examine, say, the biblical understanding of how the Earth came into being, it took 7 days, 7 days. Well, chronologically, in science, that's an accurate portrayal. That we don't know how long a day was. It could have been 500 million years, a billion years. But the time sequence, the frame of when one thing occurred after another, is correct. Therefore, no, science and religion, the knowledge is the same thing. When we start to look at ETs and life in the universe, we also have to imagine that God or the divine creator didn't say humanity's got all the jewels, all the gold, all the wonderful possibilities, and the rest of the universe has got nothing. No, that's not how it works. If there's life in the universe, as religion would say, all creatures are blessed with the influence of God, and that they share his attributes, his understanding, whatever. There are civilizations out there that have never known war.
Well, see, here's the trippy thing with that is if we could move, let's say you and I 10,000 years in the future, right? In our future, and look back at 10, 15, 20, 50,000 years of modern human existence from this day forward. Forget about the past. How much of it would we have achieved true happiness? Right. And I would say that it would probably be almost cyclical. Like we would almost get there and then we would screw it up. We would almost get there and screw it up. Or it would basically all suck. I don't know if we could ever, you know what I mean? But if you go back to the deep past, right? Because we're always trying to achieve this. How do we get everybody on this planet happy? How do we do that? You know, and we always seem to screw it up. But the Egyptians, for almost 2,000 years, no war, right? Think about that. 2,000 years, no war. They had it figured out. And I don't know if we, the way that we think today, if we could ever get back to that. And like I said, if we could, you and I could go 100,000 years in the future and then look back at us from 2023 forward, how many times did we get close to bliss? Yep. You know, to true happiness on this planet? I don't know. I think it would be 100,000 years of suckiness.
This is the spiritual and the philosophical questions about this phenomena. And the thing is, when you understand what I call progressive revelation, where spirituality is renewed, and by that renewal, usually it comes into being because there is a prophet or manifestation of God that appears to humanity and teaches them certain things. And if humanity does that, then we will have peace. In fact, any of the religions that exist today could have brought about world peace.
Sure.
But the problem is that
they all have the same 10 basic laws.
Yeah, that's right, the golden rule.
Right.
The problem,
and we don't have problems with any of that.
Yeah, but
we'll certainly kill each other over it. Right?
Yeah, but here's the problem. Humanity is disobedient. They think they know it all. They say, well, I don't like that law, but I like that one. I think women should do this, but men should be able to do that. You know, in other words, there's all this segregation and dividing up of different things and following certain rules and not following other rules. The point is, it's like if there's a loving God that presents a gift to us, and says, if you take this gift and you follow it, your life is going to be so much better than it is. The problem is you do get pockets of civilization, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in India, whether it's in China, whether it's in Iran, Europe, North America, Central America. These are pockets of civilization. In order for that to occur, they had to have done something right up to a point. And then things fell apart. in this day and age, what we've seen is various forms of unity. If we look back at historically and biblically, that the first form of unity was within a family, mother, father, children. And as that family grew and there were siblings and grandchildren and whatnot, then the family unit grew, and there had to be some form of unity in order to make them cohesive so they can work along each other and develop houses, whatever, or a society. As time goes on, you find that another prophet shows up and gives a greater form of unity. So, for instance, we look at Abraham, and Abraham was given the prophet. He had 3 wives. He was given, each wife was told the great nations, kings, and prophets would come from his lineage. That did occur. What has taken place over the years is we've had family unity, we've had village, town, city type unity. Muhammad brought nationhood to the world, believe it or not. That's what he brought about. In this day and age, we're looking at global unity, and that is the purpose of the twin prophets, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, to bring about global unity. And the Baha'is recognize that at some point we will achieve this. Whether we fight against it or not, we will achieve it. However, we also look that down the road there may be interplanetary unity, and beyond that, maybe interstellar or intergalactic or cosmic unity. All these, because everything we do is to unify us. We get through one set of problems and barriers, and we find ourselves working together, and then we deal up with other problems and issues, because now we're dealing with new terms and new conditions that we've never dealt with before. So if you're trying to achieve global unity, certain things have to take place on this planet. And that is, we have to start acknowledging that all religions are one, that there's only one divine creator, there's only one human species, that men and women are partners equally and not one gender lords it over the other, that we have to understand that there is an economic solution or a spiritual solution to the economic problem, that we can have world unity with a world police force backed up with all the nations of the world. We're not talking about a militaristic society. We're talking about a society that is based on spiritual and material values that work together as partnership with each other. When we achieve that, there's going to be a new set of conditions and problems that we'll deal with. If we can do this for a number of, say, a couple of thousand years or 5,000 years and do it well, then we will realize that as we're reaching out into space, we're going to be contacting other life forms. We're going to be trying to understand them, trying to share what we know about ourselves and what we know about the universe, and they will do likewise. With that comes a new set of problems. Nothing is going to be easy. It's always a struggle, but the rewards are outrageously beyond our imagination. That we're going to have things happening, like if we can achieve world unity on this planet, we're going to find that we can clean up the environment, there won't be pollution, that people will all work together to make a better world economically, that most people will be of a middle class as opposed to being poor or extremely rich, which are really opposing forces that are tearing us apart, because a lot of us in the middle now are being pulled down into the lower income. So there has to be some kind of situation that will allow us to deal with extremes of wealth and extremes of poverty. Nobody should be poor. In fact, the duty of the rich is to help the poor. That's what their riches are for. It's like the body of an individual. If blood is equated as money and it flows through the body, it has to continually flow through the body. Each organ, each capillary, each limb is getting vitality from the blood that moves through it. Well, if the world politic is the same way, money has to circulate It cannot stagnate into one area where the rest of the body suffers. If the body doesn't get its fair share of blood, what happens to the body? It gets sick or it dies. And then who benefits? No one.
Well, we just had that prophet. He was just here. It was Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
and I'm not joking. You know what I mean? Where you have somebody around you that allows you to forget about the barriers, the boundaries, and the lines in the sand that separate all of us. And that's always the difficult thing. And then if we take that and we flip it around, and everything that you just said, how can you argue with that? You can't. But here's the thing. Our government, if it is in possession of ET craft, then therefore they understand all of this. And they know that this is about to spring upon the rest of the world. They know all of it. They absolutely understand this. If they are in possession of extraterrestrial vehicles that are not made on this planet, and I believe that they are, so they truly understand all of this. The problem that they have, Terry, again, that 100,000 years of suckiness that I was talking about, this is part of the problem. If they are in possession of, and you said Stephen Greer is going to do the big reveal. Well, I hope that he does. But let's say that they are in possession of knowledge and technology that is 0 point energies and free energy that would light and heat schools and provide food and farming and logistics and shipping and take care of everything on this planet that we've been struggling and killing ourselves over, and fossil fuels. If that's the case, and that reveal has happened, and the government has been sitting on this technology, then we've got a bigger problem. Mm-hmm. And that is why I feel that the reveal isn't going to happen the way that we would like it to, because we would burn this sucker down.
Exactly. That's exactly what would happen, because there's a time in every civilization or society where people who you trusted to look after the welfare of society betrayed you. And what do they usually do? They go and take them and put them to death, string them up, shoot them, crucify them, whatever they do, they get rid of them. And if anybody was associated with them, they're rounded up and the same thing happens. Yep. So then you got a mob mentality. You can't have that. There has to be sane heads. It means that we have to have good judicial court systems that are going to try people, particularly for crimes against humanity. And there's been a lot of them. And the thing is that when we do this, we're going to start to see real justice take place. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it's not. It's going to probably take several generations for it to happen.
But see, that's continuing the 100,000 years of suckiness. What we should do is absolutely forgive and move on. And that
we may have to do that too anyway. But the thing is, the thing that's lacking in society today is true justice, truthfulness, disclosure, transparency. It doesn't matter whether if you're a government official, you are responsible back to your constituents. They voted you in, and they can just as easily turf you out. If you push the buttons wrong, they can just, we saw an attempt on Washington with Trump and all of his fellow believers who trusted him, and that was basically anarchy. It went to an extreme. Had there been something more of a well-directed manner of dealing with this, then perhaps there might have been some changes. But you can't have anarchy and expect positive results. So suckiness will happen. But the thing that we have to realize is you got to start beginning it right now. You got to start treating your fellow human being with courtesy. My wife and I practice that all the time. We talk to people from every culture, every background, etc., because we realize they're all the same people. May look different, may have a different custom, may have a different language, It doesn't matter. You're a human being. You're going to be treated as a respected human being. That's one of the first things we got to do. Then all the other differences, say in religion or social values or philosophical values, we have to have our wisest people sit down and work through it. They have to consult together. Our politicians globally have to sit down and work out their problem. And it isn't going to be something that happens overnight. It's going to be a process. But if everybody's willing to work towards that eventual unity, whatever that global unity will look like, then we'll be on our way in the right direction. And who knows what the future will offer us. I'm very hopeful. But is it going to happen in my lifetime? No.
Yeah.
But it will happen probably in 1,000 years. I believe that.
Well, okay. So back to, and again, nobody's going to argue your points. You're spot on the money. But here's the point that I was making earlier. If we are in possession of a craft not made of this earth, right? And I believe that we are. I have to back up where my mind is. I believe that we have, and we're not the only country, by the way. But if that's the case, then that means that our governments and the corporations that are in possession of those craft are in communication with these extraterrestrial civilizations, and they are advanced. And the fact that we are separated and nasty on this planet, we're told that by ET. And they know that we have to make these corrections on this planet, or we're not going to get a seat at the table. It's really that simple. Who would want to hang out with us? Well, probably nobody.
That's exactly what's happening. We're given an opportunity right now, not only to achieve global unity. This is why we've got two prophets this time around, not one, who are working to bring about global unity.
Who? Elvis, and who's the other one?
This is the Bob and Baha'u'llah. And what that is, I mean, you can find all of those in the Bible. It doesn't matter which religion, you can find references to these people. What I'm getting at is that when we go down that path, we have to work at it consistently. We have to do what is required. It may mean that there's certain sacrifice. If ETs are in contact with certain governments, and governments know that, then yes, they would probably know some of these things. What they say that science and religion would be at a disadvantage. Yes, some of science and some of religion would be. The real people who will be at a disadvantage are the people in power. They're afraid of losing their position.
Sure.
Because they've held it over all of us for such a long time. They would like to see a breakaway society, which is what Richard Dolan has been saying. And it's probably already happened in a black subversive manner, that there's a black runaway society. And, the fact is that they've got the new technology and they're doing whatever the hell they want. When they go to Mars, life is only one thing they're looking for. They're looking for technology. And there's all kinds of technology all over the place if you look for it in the right place. I found it. I've had Richard Hoagland basically inspiring me to look for certain things. And when I started digging around and started blowing things up and looking at it, all of a sudden I'm saying, oh my God, there is some artificial artifacts on the surface there that looks like giant cogs or wheels or stone heads, or there's ET surveillance drones flying around, all of this stuff. And then we're seeing the dead corpses, etc., which fulfills what Joseph McGonigal, who was part of the Stargate remote viewers, he said he remote viewed tall beings that were at least 10 feet tall. We found them. That's exactly what we found. So the thing is, we know now that there is life on other planets, and we know the fact that some of that life is visiting us. So we have to get ourselves mentally, morally, spiritually, socially, politically, scientifically prepared for this. If we're not prepared, we're going to have a lot more problems. We're going to be sucking along, as you say.
Yeah, 100,000 years of suckiness. Terry, what a fantastic conversation tonight. Where can everybody get the 6-volume set?
Right. Okay, here's the thing. They are going to be expensive. They're like a university textbook. I'm working on trying to get the prices reduced, even if as a complete set. You can get them from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Hudson Books, Booktopia, Bookworld, BAM, Books A Million. That's in the States. There's a whole bunch of others. In Canada, you can get it from Chapters and Indigo. What you have to do is you have to go in. You have to go to their computer or somebody who can go online and look for the books, and they're there. And what you do is you decide. I would recommend get the first volume because it's the basic primer to everything that you want to know about the UFO ET phenomena. What the other books do is I take you down the rabbit hole, and by the time you come out, you're going to say, "My God, I didn't realize just how deep this whole subject went," because it's now about the military-industrial complex, the unacknowledged special access projects, the disclosure events, the cover-ups, what you need to do in order to go out and make contact. And there's a whole section on that in Volume 6. So if you go online, you can order the books. I believe that once you order these books, you're going to find just about all the information you ever want, including stuff about what is going on with UAPs. I threw that in at the last moment before I put the last book out. Mm-hmm. And I talk about certain individuals, and some of it isn't very positive because it's showing their true colors, as it were. I review a lot of fellow researchers. Most of it's all positive. I look at the types of UFOs, how to identify common everyday objects in unusual circumstances. I talk about the ET types of classifications. I delve into the astronomy aspect of it. I look at what's on various planets. And at the end of it all, I give all kinds of quotes from generals and military and science community and intelligence communities from other nations, all saying there's something to this. And we've known about it for a long time. So to say we don't know is not a truthful statement. And so you're going to find that in these books. And I guarantee you, you're going to be doing a lot of reading because there's a lot of information there. I have to review 70 years worth of information and bring it down. I was able to write the books in 8 years and spent 2 years editing. It's
a lot of work. It's a lot of pages. It's a lot of pages.
Of pages. Well documented, well referenced. It's going to be your go-to book. I guarantee it. There's nothing right now in the UFO literature out there like this. I was going to be so bold and ambitious that I was going to throw a CD of each book into each book that you bought. But then I realized this was going to cost you an arm and a leg to acquire it. But I didn't go down that road.
Terry, thank you so much, and I look forward to our next conversation on the show. So much we didn't get into astronomy tonight. We didn't get into the CE5 protocols and so many other subjects and black projects. We'll do all of that later on future shows. But thank you so much, and everybody, head to Amazon, get your 6-volume set. Terry, be safe out there, and good luck at Dr. Greer's event.
Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you. Do it again.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
All right, peace.
Terry Tibando, and Terry's links are there not only on our website but throughout social media. And head over to Amazon. The volumes are Volume 1, Global Evidence; Volume 2, UFO Disclosure and Covert Programs; Volume 3, The Military Industrial Complex; Volume 4, In Search of Extraterrestrial Intelligence; Volume 5, Evidence of a Type 2 Civilization in Our Solar System; and Volume 6, The Rosetta Stone of ETI Contact. So go and check it out right now. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We are headed into the weekend. I've got a busy weekend in front of me, but I'll keep everybody posted as to what I am doing and what is going on. And of course, next week on Fade to Black. Fade to Black is produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJZR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Have a great, safe weekend, everybody. Go back, Lee Tappy.